Hi, I'm Danny, and this is a tutorial on how to make a magic charm pouch like these ones. This tutorial supports the kit that you may have purchased or received as a gift, but if you've just come across this video, you can also use any material that you have lying around the house. This is a great little project for learning hand sewing and for using up scraps that you might have, fabric scraps that you might have lying around the house. So we're gonna get right into it. I have removed these things from the kit. If you do have a kit, there is enough materials to make at least two magic charm pouches. There are two pieces of base fabric that's about 8 inches by 3 inches. I'm very sorry for my Canadian friends. I did most of the measuring in Imperial today. There are 3 colors of embroidery thread that will go with the base fabric, and there's a handful of scraps in different shapes and sizes. Most of them are sort of square or rectangle, and I have chosen these 3 plus this orange button to make my pouch today. So everything that you see here is included in the kit. What is not included in the kit, but I also have on the table, is a pair of scissors, a little bit of craft glue, just like a ordinary school glue stick. And because I have old Gen X eyes, use this needle threader. So you might not need a needle threader, and good for you if you don't. So we're gonna go ahead and make our pouch. So I've got my scraps here. I'm gonna put those aside for a minute. This is the string that will be used as it's a drawstring pouch, so you can see how the string and the bead attach. We're gonna put those aside for now. So this is what we're gonna make. It is just a cute little drawstring pouch. It is all hand sewn. Everything you need is in the kit, as I said, and this bag is wonderful for keeping little treasures. This one has a shard of sea glass in it, wonderful for spell components. Imagine if you had a wish or a dream or an intention, you could write that on a piece of paper and tuck it inside. But they can also be quite practical. When I'm traveling, I keep my hearing aids in one of these little pouches, or if you have other little treasures that you need to hide away. So that's what we're going to be making, except we're going to be making it on this blue fabric base with these scraps of fabric. You don't really need to know how to sew for this project. It does involve hand sewing, and I will show you some basic techniques. I'm just going to get the kit bag out of the way. But if you know how to thread a needle and put it through a piece of fabric, you have the skills that you need. I can show you more, and then Google's your friend, because if you're interested in learning more than just basic running stitches, which is what we use for this, is you can see here all of these lines of thread here. That's called the running stitch. It is the most basic of all the embroidery stitches. It is just under, over, under, over, under, over, all the way across. But I don't think I have it on these ones. You can see it's decorated on both sides. Sometimes I will use lazy daisy embroidery stitches or chain stitch. Once you know the basics, then you can take off and start embellishing from there. So we start with our piece of base fabric, and what we're gonna do, this is gonna fold in half like that. Eventually we're gonna fold this under to make a little channel for that drawstring to go through. We're gonna sew along there, we're gonna sew along the edges, and then our pouch will be complete. But we start by decorating it with the scraps that we have. So I have chosen these 3 fabric scraps. As you can see from some of these designs, less is more. I would choose maybe 2, 3 at most fabric scraps to start. You can see that some of them, I have layered them right up into the drawstring pouch area. Some of them go right to the edge of the fabric. Some of them overlap each other a little bit. Just remember that you are going to be hand sewing with a needle all of these pieces. So I wouldn't layer them too thickly. You can see these ones go right to the edge, and they're layered over here. I also want to point out that none of these edges are finished. I prefer a raw edge. I like the look. These pouches were made actually last year, and so there's only a tiny little bit of fraying that's going on. If you're interested in making a more finished edge, look up needle turn applique, and it will give you some techniques on making this sort of thing, but with a finished edge. But for our purposes today, we're going to be working with raw edges, and we're going to embrace all the fraying and the rustic little things that happen. So I've got my pouch here, my base layer here, and the first thing I'm going to do is decide how I want my fabric pieces to be attached. And I'm going to keep in mind that there's going to be a fold here. So this is going to be like the front and this is going to be the back. So I want to keep that in mind, that is going to be a fold here. Decide how I want, do I want them to overlap? Do I want them to, I have a thing for selvages, the raw edges of bolts of fabric. I don't know why, I'm just always kind of liked them. So just start out by deciding how you want your pieces to be laid out. I think I might layer them up like this, and then I'm keeping in mind that there's going to be a fold here for the drawstring. I might do it, you know what? I'm going to do it like that. And then in the end, I'm also going to take my button and I'm going to sew it on there, kind of like this one is sewn on. This one's got a button that's squared, but the square would almost disappear with that big button. So I like this layout. So I'm going to start by lightly gluing them down. Some people might be horrified by the idea of gluing them down, but it's just a really easy way to keep the fabric in place. You're not using a huge amount of glue. I just kind of dab it on a little bit onto the back, and it's only going to be glued. The glue only has to be in place long enough until our stitches take over the important part of holding things in place. You can also pin your fabric down if you like. You can also just hold it and freehand it. As with all of my craft projects, there are very few rules here. I'm giving you some ideas and I'm giving you some guidelines. And if you have the kit, I've given you some materials, but really, make it your own. There's no police who are going to come and knock down your door and tell you that you're doing it wrong. Make stuff up, have fun with it, use your imagination. And if it doesn't work out, oh well, you know what? There's enough materials for 2 pouches in your kit. And then I hope that you will use the ideas that you learn in this project and you will collect your own materials and start building more and more and more pouches. A universe full of unique pouches, because there's material everywhere. You can get it from thrift stores, you can get it from crafters de-stash sales. I get some from my Buy Nothing group. I almost never go to the fabric store. There are all sorts of places, and you can tell like the tiny pieces that you have that you need for a project like this. So it's great for using up your stash. Okay, so we have our pieces glued down and we're ready now to start hand stitching. So you also in your kit have 3 different colors of embroidery floss. If you haven't worked with embroidery floss before, I'm just going to decide, I'm going to go with this medium blue color. Done such a good job. Where is the end? Oh, there's the end. Okay. So if you haven't worked with embroidery floss before, it's actually got 6 individual little strands, and you can work with all the strands together. That's like a fairly chunky piece of floss, or you could use these 6 strands individually, or you can pull out 2 or 3 of them. Again, there's no rules. What you should do is maybe cut yourself a piece. You can't see me off camera. It's about 30 centimeters long, maybe a foot long. And I'm going to cut that. Okay. Now I Don't usually use all 6 pieces in one go unless I'm going for an effect. I like to separate my pieces. So in this case, I'm going to pull out the threads one at a time. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of plucking those apart. Is that visible? And I'm going to find one individual strand. I promise I'm going to, there it is. Okay, nope. So I've got one strand, and I'm holding the rest of the strands. See how it's starting to pucker up there? I'm just going to draw this straight ahead. Can you see? I'm pulling that out, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to make a huge tangle. It's going to make a knot. It doesn't though. As long as you pull that one piece straight out, easy peasy. So I'm going to, and what, I don't know, was it on camera? I just dropped the other thread for a second. So I'm going to use 2 strands. So I'm going to pull out that second piece, and I'm just going to pull it straight ahead. And there's that big tangle happening again. But embroidery floss is designed for this. As soon as you let it go, you can straighten that right back out again. So I'm going to put these 4 strands that I'm not using off camera, and I am going to get the 2 pieces that I pulled out. I'm going to line them up, and now I have a 2-stranded thread that I'm going to use for my running stitch, and that's what we're going to use to attach the little squares. I've got my needle, I've got my threader. These threaders are magic. They're a little hard to find, but they're my favorite. They're so much better than the wire ones. Okay, don't need that anymore. And then this is a quilter's knot. This is one of my favorite embroidery discoveries. So if you kind of pinch the end against your needle, and you want to go from the base where the eye is towards the tip, and wrap it a couple times. 1, 2, 3. If you do embroidery, it's a little bit like a French knot. And then, so that was, I wrapped it around 3 times, and then I'm just going to shove everything. And I'm going to draw that all the way down, and it makes a nice little knot at the end of our fabric. So now I have to decide, what kind of stitching am I going to do? For example, this one's a little hard to see, but this one I did a line of running stitch as an out. I kind of secured it in place, and then I did like an interior box. So that's how I secured this piece. But on this side, I did just lines of running stitch straight across everything. I could have, in this example, I extended the lines of running stitch all the way across the this half of the bag. And in fact, I went all the way up on this part, so that follows all the way down. But here I did it just on the red patch and on the yellow part, and this is not stitched. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Yes, it is. So this is stitched all the way across. This one, the block of running stitch, is holding this little piece at the top in line, and it goes straight down, and holding this piece in line, and then I've got some extra lines here, and you can see that I changed thread color. So this is like a green here, and this is purple here. So this is part of the design process of you deciding what you want your pouch to look like. There's no wrong answers. You can't do it wrong, I promise. Well, maybe if you like sew it to your sleeve, that might be wrong. So I'm deciding, I think I'm going to go with lines of running stitch just across the middle here, and then I might do some on this part over here. So I start, I've got, see how that's loose? Don't worry about that, that's fine. It's being more or less held down by the glue. We'll get to that. And if it falls off and we have to glue it again, then we'll do that. So I'm just going to start in this corner right here. I'm going to come up. So keep in mind, this is the outside. This is going to be the inside of the pouch. The inside of the pouch, I'll show you one inside out. The inside of the pouch is messy looking. You can see, oops, see glass fell out. You can see here's my knots, and it's a little bit more ragged. This is the beauty of handmade things. If anybody says that it's like less than perfect, you tell them that's right. It's because it was made by hand. It wasn't made by a machine. So I pull that through until I get to the knot. Okay, so let's talk about the running stitch. You can do a running stitch by going like this and drawing your thread all the way through. And then you come up And then it means you have to find the spot more or less where you want it to come up. You pull it all the way through. You can do it that way, but that takes a lot of work. What's much easier is if you do multiple stitches at the same time. And the nice thing about that is it helps you make a kind of a straight line. So I want to go about here. So I'm going to go in and then back out, and in and then back out, and in and then back out. So I'm keeping an eye on how close I am to the edge. You don't want to get too close or it will fray, but you want to be close enough that it's going to be secured. So I've got like 3 or 4 stitches there, and then you just pull it through all in one gesture. And it's a nice way to keep your stitches a little bit straighter, but I'm not super good at straight stitches. A lot of my work is rustic. Whoops. So then I just keep doing the same thing. I just go up and down. You can see I'm holding the needle steady more or less, and I'm moving the fabric. So I ended that part on the back side of the fabric. Not really huge. Whoops. This is me. Sorry. Let me put my glue away. And put the cap on it. Professional videos too, right? Even my videos are rustic. I pull that all the way through. Now, I could decide to go down and make a nice little box and then make another little box in here. That would be one way to do the design. Personally, I think I want to keep going with the back and forth. So I come back up from where I was on the back, and I am just going to do the same thing. Try not to stab yourself too hard. I mean, I don't think it's possible to sew without stabbing yourself a little bit, just part of the process. You might note that hang on, I'll just want to do one more thing here. So, and then you pull it through. So you can see my stitches are wonky, right? I mean, there's a little bits of up and down here. Some people would prefer a much more brick-like alternating or exactly on the same plane. If I was not sewing and recording this video at the same time, I would probably be paying a little bit more attention to that, but I can only think about so many things at a time, and I'm just gonna roll with it. We're just gonna call that my aesthetic. Okay. So there's 2 rows, and so I'm going to pause the filming, and I'll come back and show you when I finish this block. Okay, so I am not quite done the stitching on this block. You can see I would probably maybe put at least 1 more block in, and then I might put an extra little block, an extra little row, just to keep the end of my square covered so it doesn't flop too much. But I have run out of workable thread embroidery floss, so I just thought I would show you what happens when you need to change floss if you've run out. Super simple. So there's the back, and I am just going to make a little knot. I push the blunt end through a stitch. I mean, you can make a knot any way you like. This is just how I make my knots. I go back, and then, oops, that's not a knot. One more time through is gonna make it a knot. And I pull that tight. This is not a piece of clothing, so it doesn't need to put up with a lot of stress. So any way you can make a knot is fine. I like to make 2. Come back, catch, oops. This is a really terrible job. One more time. Always leave yourself a fair bit of slack when it's time to tie off. There's nothing worse than trying to tie off and having just a stub that you can't work with. And then I just tuck it under 1 or 2 nearby threads just to discourage it from unraveling. So that's 1 piece of, I guess, a dual strand floss that I've used up. So now remember this was the 4 strands that were left over. You're not gonna knot, are you? No. So now I'm gonna pluck out 2 more strands. So we had a willing tribute there. Oh, now I've come back into the herd. It might be tempting to pull 2 at a time, don't do it. That's where knots come. So grab one and draw it straight forward. And pull this back and draw your second one straight forward. Take a second. You might think that, hey, you're only using two. Why don't you use those two that are in your hand? I like to separate every single strand. They're a little bit twisted together. I'm gonna put that aside for now. So yeah, that is a shortcut that you can take, but I find after dealing with so many knots, it's just less likely to knot if you take the time to make your strands nice and clean in parallel. So I need my needle and I need my needle threader, and I slide my threader through, I hook it, I pull. I can't tell you the number of times when I have thrown down the needle instead of the needle threader. And making these ends equal, get more or less to the end. And here's where I pinch that to make that quilter's knot. So I pinch it like this, and I'm working from the eye end towards the point end, and I go around 3 or 4 times, and then I kind of pinch those rolls and slide them the full length, and there's my knot. So now I go back here and I say, where did I leave off? Looks like it was right about here. So now I've just, there's my first knot, my tie-off knot, and there's my new launch knot, and I'm going to continue with this running thread, or with this running stitch, I should say. And I'll be back when it's done. Okay, so welcome back. You can see that I completed the stitching around this block here. I don't know how clear it is on the camera, but I decided that I would just block stitch around the outside just for a little decorative feature. And then you can see I've also stitched the yellow block in place with some stitches going in the opposite direction. And then when the pouch comes together, it's going to be folded kind of like that, and that'll be, one will be the front and one will be the back. Now I had also said that I wanted to sew this button on. So I've got a little bit of thread left here, not a huge amount, but it should be enough to attach the button. So I'm going to make my little knot again. Slide this down. Now, thinking about where I'm going to place the button, I kind of want it to be about there. I think looks good. I'm sort of placing it relative to this block, in the center of this block, and I'm mindful that this is going to be folded down. So yeah, I'm going to put my button there. And there's always that fun game of intuitively finding the buttonhole, weirdly. I don't know why this works. Hey, when you have an audience, it does not. Okay, more than one way to skin a cat. There we go. Again, this isn't a piece of clothing. It's more of a decorative item. So I'm not too worried about how firmly that button is going to be attached. It's not going to be a lot of stress on it. And then I just make my knot. Pull it down. One more time through for good luck. Under, and through. There we go. And now my button is attached. Okay, so now we've done all of our decorative stitching. There's the front side. You can see all my stitching on the back. Not terribly neat, but that's okay because that's the inside of the pouch. And then just working with raw fabric, you're gonna have all these little loose ends. Some of those are gonna disappear into the seams. The only closed seam we have is where we attach the pouch. So that's the next step, or the step after this step. The first thing we wanna do though, we wanna make little channels for our drawstring. So you'll see, whoops, more pieces of sea glass hiding inside. You'll see that I have stitched a little channel here. You can see there's the stitches on the outside and there's the stitches on the inside, and that's for the drawstring to run through because we want these to be drawstring pouches. They can be cinched closed. So we make these channels by really simply just, that's probably about 1 centimeter. So what is that, maybe 1/2 inch? And I just finger press it lightly. And then I'm actually going to do my construction in my, so here's my embroidery thread again. I'm gonna do my construction in one strand of the darker embroidery thread. So I'm gonna pull myself off a long enough piece to work with, cut that off. I'm gonna find one strand, pull these apart, isolate one from the herd. Don't need that right now. Okay, here's my one strand. And you can do this with 6 strands if you like. You can do it with 2 strands. You can do it however, you can do it in a contrasting color. It is going to be visible. So you can make that part of your design choices. Just because it's dark, I'm gonna go ahead and use only one. And once again, I find that end, make that magical quilter's knot. It's just big enough. Okay. So here's that seam I made, and we're gonna do exactly the same thing. We're gonna make the, we're gonna sew along this seam right here using the same sort of stitch we used here. The running stitch does a lot of work in this project. Make sure the only thing to think about really is that your knot should be on the inside part of your bag. So you're gonna make your fold so it comes towards the inside, and then stitch. This is going to be sort of inside of the pouch. Get the first stitch or two going so that I'm set. Okay, and then you can see I'm just kind of holding that closed with my fingers. Just now, when you're doing this running stitch here, make sure, it's really important to make sure you go through both layers of the fabric. So there's the inside, and there's the outside, and it's crossing over our block here, and it's visible, but that's okay, because remember, it's a rustic project. There are lots of people who are hand sewers who have exquisite, perfectly even stitches, and I'm not one of them. But for me, that's part of the charm. There we go. So that is holding that seam down. There's the front and the back. And then I'm just going to make a little knot by going out once and back in once. Just sort of reinforce that corner, and I'll tie that off. Usually I put the butt end of the needle through, but just because that was a small little spot, I put the pointy end through this time. Knot that once, luck. Oh, not that, one more time. Okay, and there we made one channel for our drawstring. And we're going to turn the project around and just make sure you do it exactly the same way. Don't worry about those loose threads. If you see loose threads like that and they bother you, just give them a little snip. Okay, we're gonna fold this end down. We're gonna make the fold about the same width. Give it a little finger press. Some guidance. Quilter's knot. Go back the same exact thing. We're going to start, so there's our knot on the inside. There's our knot on the inside. We want this knot to be on the inside. And come back in almost the same spot. And we start our running stitch. And you can see I'm not using an embroidery hoop or anything else. I like holding the stitching in my hand, especially for the running stitch. You can't do it as easily. See, because how I'm bending and folding the fabric, can't really do that on an embroidery hoop. If you prefer to work in a hoop, more power to you. I use hoops for some stitching, but most of my stitching is kind of freehand, which probably also speaks to how my stitches are not the most even in the world. Now, even by my standards, my stitching is a little sloppy today, but that's because I'm keeping track of the camera and the narrative and everything else. So you'll forgive me if I'm a little more sloppy than usual. So I'm making a little knot. Run through it one more time. Okay. So now we have two channels for our drawstring. That's what the front of the pouch looks like. And then we're gonna fold it in half and stitch these seams, but we're gonna stitch those on the inside. So it has a slightly more fin. You know what? If you wanted to, you could just add more stitches here on the outside. It's just not the way I've been assembling these guys. So instead, you're going to take it and fold it with the good side, the outside, the right side together. Okay, and this is where we're gonna do our assembly stitching. So I am going to continue to use that darker thread. Oh no, there's my thread that I was working with. So I have this much left on my needle, and it's not going to be enough for me to work with. I would always rather have too much than too little. I have tons of leftover threads like this that I use for other little projects and when I need a little bit of decorative color or something like that. But embroidery thread is not expensive, and it's worth it to not be dealing with tiny ends. Just give yourself a liberal amount when you have to do something. Okay, so once again, I'm going to be using one strand for my assembly. Oops. Tie that knot. Okay, there's a couple of small things to pay attention to when you're doing your assembly. We're gonna run a drawstring that goes through here, comes out here, goes back in here. So you need to leave these ends open. That's super important. You need to leave those ends open. You need to leave this part open because that's the opening of the pouch. And then you need to close these two sides up with stitches. So when you're placing your stitches, it doesn't really matter how you go about it, but make sure that you leave these channels open for your drawstring. So I start this time, instead of going in and out, I'm going to do a little whip stitch. So I came out on the back and I'm going to go back in. And this is going to join right at the bottom of that channel. And I'm going to do like 2 more because this is the one part of the design that's going to have a little bit of stress as the pouch gets opened and closed. So we just want to make sure that that has a little bit of extra strength. Now, if you like, and you have sewing thread at home, you can absolutely do this construction part with sewing thread and it will be less visible. I just wanted you to have a complete kit where you didn't have to buy any extra materials. So that's why I'm doing this with the embroidery thread. Also, embroidery floss is not the strongest material in the world. Again, these pouches will not be, they won't have a lot of stress on them, so it's okay. But yeah, you can totally use sewing thread for this. I just want to bring my, rather than whipping it around, I'm gonna bring my thread back to this side just because I want to start my seam running stitch from this side. And we do exactly what we did before. I'm making sure that I am catching both sides and I am just making a light line of fairly short running stitches. If you wanted to, you could run that whip stitch all the way down the side. It's whatever you're comfortable with. I also like to work from the top where the drawstring is to the bottom, just because you can see it moves around a little bit, and that just ensures that it seems to be the best way to make sure the pieces stay aligned. I've made quite a few dozen of these pouches by now. But by all means, find the method that works the best for you. And I forgot to mention at the top of this video, but it is in the description, that there are written instructions for this project on my website. And the URL for that, I'll put it on screen, is curiouscrone.ca/magicpouch. Okay, so I have stitched the length of this, and I am going to go through one more time and then make just a little whip to end things off in the corner. And then I'm going to come back around and make my knot. This is all going to be on the inside, so you won't see it. Well, you know what? Let's go that way. Let's let it go that way. Why fight it? Okay, I'm going to make a little knot. And then I'm going to double back. Put my thread through there. Okay, so that's one side stitched up. Okay, I'm going to stitch the other side back, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm done my stitching. I'm just cutting the final thread. So you watched me stitch this seam, and then I slipped away and I stitched that seam. There you can see it on the other side. You can see that I wandered a little close to the edge because I wasn't paying attention when I was talking to you, but that's okay. There's still enough here that it's going to catch the seam. So the next thing we do is we're all ready to go. We are going to turn it right side out. So we'll see that the part where the drawstring goes, we didn't sew over those ends, so that's good. Yay us. Now we're going to turn it right side around. I just stick my fingers down. Sometimes it's helpful if you have a pencil to get these corners turned out. I'm just going to use my fingers. But yeah, that helps. Okay, and then I just use my fingers to pull, straighten those seams out. Yeah, see, I missed a little bit on this seam here. I should have been more careful. So there's something you can watch out for. Make sure that you're catching all of your fabric with your, when you're stitching your seams. But that's okay. This one's just a demo to give you an idea of the mistakes that you should not make. And here we are on the other side. So there's one thing left to do, and that is to add the strings that make our pouch a drawstring pouch. So you'll need 2 pieces of the thicker cotton string that is in your kit. And then if you like, you can add on a little bead for decoration. Now the easiest way to do this is using a nice blunt tapestry needle like this that has a wide eye. But I'm going to show you a trick if you don't have that available to you. This is a paper clip, and we are going to straighten out the paper clip. And this is really just to help feed the drawstring through the channel. So I unfold the paper clip all the way, and then I fold it back in loose half. I'm just making a big wire V. Okay, and then put that in there, and then we feed the ends of our paper clip. Okay. Open that up a little bit. Okay, so I want to feed those right in here. And this just helps drag it through. So there, it's looped around my paper clip. And then I just slide this until my paper clip comes out the other end. And I pull it through just like a needle. Now hold on to one end, or else you're going to pull the entire thing through. Okay, so now you have gone, let's call this the front. You have gone from the left front to the right front. With the same string, you're going to go to the back, and you're going to open up your little channel. Oops. This is hard to do in a way that I can also show you. There we go. Okay, so he's still looped through there. I'm going to slide this along the channel until he pokes out the other side, holding on to that first end until this is all the way through. Okay, that has served his job. Pull this through. Okay, so what we have, pull that till they're even. We have a cord that goes in on the left front, goes all the way around here, through the gap, into the other channel, and over on this side. Now, that's a good time to get rid of some loose threads. Now we need its opposite mate. So we are going to start from the right side. Drag. Like I said, this is easier with the tapestry needle, but if you don't happen to have a tapestry needle, I bet you have a paper clip. So we pull through on the opposite side, getting the other complications out of the way. here's the end that I'm holding. I give that a good tug, and then I'm gonna feed. So I go past these dangling threads, get him out of the way, slide into the channel again one more time. So we've got 2 threads that are running opposite directions through the channels. Pull this through. So now we have strings on the left and strings on the right, and when you take them together, that's how we cinch our bag closed. The wonders of drawstring. Okay, and if you didn't get it right the first time, that's okay. Just slide it out and do it again. And then if you want to add the little bead on the end, I've got my needle threader. I'm gonna use the big end. There we go, success. And then you're just gonna tie a little overhand knot. Now you want your bead to be placed so that when the pouch is open and flat, that's about where you want your bead to be. Tie a little overhand knot here. You might need, depending on, these beads are quite tight, depending on the bead you use, you might need something that's a little, you might need to make a knot that is bigger, but that's not gonna go anywhere. We'll do the same thing on the other side. This bead has a much better hole in it. Pull that right up to where the pouch is, nice and flat. Tie a knot. And the knot just keeps the bead from sliding off the end. And we can cut away the excess, or not, as you wish. And there we go. There is our drawstring magic charm pouch bag. And now you can put your secret treasures in there, like maybe your favorite needle threader, or a couple of pieces of sea glass, or a magic spell, or an intention, or spell components, or baby teeth, or plant seeds, or whatever it is you want to hide away. And then if you like, you can trim away all those loose threads, or you can leave them and say that it was part of the design. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I am Curious Crone on Instagram, and my website is curiouscrone.ca, and you'll find the written instructions for this tutorial at curiouscrone.ca/magic pouch. I would love to see your creations. Thanks. Have a lovely day.